New York Counts 2020 and the Center for Law and Social Justice at Medgar Evers College prepared this presentation. The Center for Law and Social Justice is a member of New York Counts 2020 and the convener of NYC Black Leadership Advisory Coalition for Census 2020.
New York Counts 2020 is a statewide coalition comprised of more than 80 diverse stakeholder groups across New York, seeking a fair and accurate 2020 census count. Our goal is to maximize the opportunity for all New Yorkers to be counted.
The Center for Law and Social Justice, a 32-year-old racial justice law center, is the convener of Nick Black for Census 2020, a New York City-based coalition comprised of organizations and individuals servicing communities of African descent. We work in partnership with allies, city, local, and state government officials to ensure a full count of New York City communities of African descent in the 2020 census.
Brooklyn Community Foundation, New York Counts 2020, and the Center for Law and Social Justice are proud members of the Brooklyn Borough President's Complete Count Committee. We hope you'll also join this committee so we can all work together to be sure Brooklyn is counted.
Do you want Brooklyn to get its fair share of federal funding? Learn how the count in 2020 will impact your life, those you love, your neighborhood, and your community every day for the next 10 years.
Now we'll cover what is Census 2020 and why is Census 2020 vital to Brooklynites. The U.S. Census is a count of all persons living in the United States. Our Constitution mandates that this count be done every 10 years. The census asks basic questions about your home, whether your home is owner-occupied or rented, the number of people in your home, and your phone number. For each member of your household, the census will also ask for their name, sex, age, and race. The Census Bureau is required to keep your responses confidential. In 2020, for the first time, the census will be completed online, and it can also be completed on the phone. The Census Bureau will make the 2020 census available online and over the phone in 13 languages: English, Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, Russian, Arabic, Tagalog, Polish, French, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, and Spanish. And the deaf will also have the ability to use telecommunication devices to complete the census. If you don't complete the census online or on the phone, you can complete it in paper form and mail it back to the Census Bureau.
So why is Census 2020 vital to Brooklynites? We have good and bad news. The bad news is that in 2010, Brooklyn was the borough with the highest undercount. That means for every person who was not counted in Brooklyn, the borough lost $2,687 per person in federal funding. Census reports are also used by city planners, businesses, and private foundations. Because of that undercount in 2010, Brooklynites also lost jobs, infrastructure investments, and community resources. The good news is it doesn't have to be that way forever. Complete Count committees, like Brooklyn's Complete Count Committee, work locally to tackle fears and facts about the census. This work drives up our count, turnout, visibility, and in turn, our representation and community investment.
There are many communities that are historically undercounted on the census. Some of these communities have extensive histories that are marked by government-sponsored discrimination and the denial of equitable civic and societal engagement. In these communities, even though multiple persons in the household may be eligible to fill out the census form, there may be only one form returned, if a form is returned at all. College students or persons living in multifamily homes may not know that they also need to complete the form. Sadly, African American men and children under the age of 4 are the least counted. There are many reasons why Brooklynites might not want to answer the census form. Some of these reasons include language barriers, lack of knowledge, fear of government, and the digital divide. All of these and more may play a role. On the other hand, there are communities who don't have the same history of language barriers or neglect by government, so their participation rates are higher, and as a result, they are able to access greater amounts of resources and enhanced political power. Much attention has been given to the Census Bureau's decision to add a citizenship question to the Census 2020, but lawsuits have been filed to challenge this move. Once those lawsuits have been decided, we will know for sure whether or not a citizenship question will be added.
Aside from the citizenship question, there's a lot of work we can do now to encourage all communities to get counted. The results of the U.S. Census determines how much federal money will be given to states. The responses to the 2020 census will determine how approximately $800 billion federal dollars will be given to states annually for 10 years. Based on reported population numbers, the federal government gives states money for schools, roads and transportation, jobs, healthcare, housing, substance use programs. Because such detailed information is captured by the census, other people rely on census data for research and published reports. Businesses, city planners, interest groups, private foundations, and media all use census reports to hire, invest, expand, and plan our communities.
Think of the census like an RSVP. You wouldn't want to show up uninvited to a holiday dinner. You might end up with someone else's scraps or leftovers, if anything at all. If our communities are not counted in the census, we may also get fewer resources, fewer opportunities, and less representation. So think for a second. If you have a 7-year-old child in 2020, what are all the resources that child would need? Quality of the public schools, meals? What are the hospitals that will serve your child? What about the library resources or condition of the roads that the school buses your child takes to travel back and forth to school? Over a 10-year period, what parks will your child play in? As they become teenagers, what part-time jobs will be available in your community? What will the conditions of the roads be when they're driving? Will they have access to a college counselor or resources? Everything your child will need in the next 10 years may come from resources that are distributed based on census data. If you didn't complete the census in 2020, then your child won't be taken into consideration for all of those resources they will need between now and when they turn 17 in 2030. Similarly, if you have an aging parent, perhaps age 67 in 2020, what resources will they need in the next 10 years after they retire? They may need Medicaid, senior programs, senior housing. If you haven't completed the census in 2020, your parent won't be counted in the funding for those resources.
In addition to funding, the results of the census determines power. The number of survey responses determine how many congressional seats New York State will have in Congress and how those lines are drawn. New York State has continuously lost seats in Congress since the 1940 census. These lost seats are due in part to the population growing in other states, but also because of undercounting. New York simply can't afford to lose congressional seats because people aren't completing the census. So if New York wants strong representation in Congress,
to support things like the Affordable Care Act, to create jobs, protect our environment, promote fair immigration policies, and safeguard Social Security, we need to be counted. Census results also impact state and local redistricting, which impacts the number of representatives we have fighting for us in Congress, at the state capitol, and in our local cities and towns.
And the results of the census are in effect for the next 10 years. Many community-based groups rely on census data to justify funding for their work, seek reforms, and advocate for policies. The higher the response rate, the more powerful your organization will be.
The good news is that you can join Brooklyn Borough President's Complete Count Committee. Please come on October 23rd for its official launch. Learn how our collective efforts on this committee can make a difference. Together, we must begin now to prepare for an accurate count in 2020. We'll take questions now.